Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Steven from NWSmallBatchBrewing here, and it is a cold day, rainy and cold and very windy today, and it's a good day for a whiskey. So I really wanted to put out this video to talk about a recent beer I made and some thoughts. So recently I made a non-alcoholic beer for somebody who wanted me to make it for somebody. And I didn't really have a lot of interest. I still don't have a lot of interest in making an NA beer, but I had never tried, and I thought, what the heck? I'm going to give it a shot. So I will put a video up in the corner, a link to it. It's a non-alcoholic cold brew coffee stout. You probably saw it a few weeks ago, a month ago, whatever. And it turned out okay. I mean, it wasn't my favorite, beer in the world, but for an NA beer, I was happy that it turned out as well as it did. That being said, I'll tell you a story. I was walking into a bottle shop, to buy some beer, and they had 2 refrigerated compartments dedicated to non-alcoholic beer. And I thought, wow, that's new. Like, it's exploding. Non-alcoholic beer, like that industry is exploding. So they did not have the beer I was looking for. So I went to another bottle shop. Yes, we have lots of them here. And when I walked in, they also had about the same space, couple like refrigerated compartments dedicated to non-alcoholic beers. I even saw the Sierra Nevada non-alcoholic pale ale that they've put out on there. Athletic Brewing, I believe, only makes non-alcoholic beer. So it's interesting, right? It's interesting. I don't want to say it's an exploding industry. It's the new thing in beer, because I just, in my heart, feel like it's not going to stick. We just had dry January and some people do dry February. And I think that has a lot to do with it because, breweries need to try to make money somehow. And if you're not drinking, their normal beer, they got to sell something. So I don't know if in June rolls around, are we still going to see that many non-alcoholic beers? I don't know. But I will say anything in the non-alcoholic side of things is an improvement over things like O'Doul's, those commercialized macro beers that are just not good. So here's the thing. Here's the concern. I read an article recently, and I've been seeing this, and it concerned me when I was making my non-alcoholic beer. And I even have talked to some people in the brew tubing, YouTube world that are doing non-alcoholic beers, and they're coming across this issue. Is safety. So normally, so when you make a beer, it's not pasteurized, right? It has enough alcohol in it and enough hops. Hops alone aren't really, because of genetics, hops don't provide the kind of safety net that they used to. A lot of bugs, like biological bugs out there have managed to not only overcome the resistance from hops, but some of them actually thrive in hop oils and whatnot. So hops still do provide some safety, but not like they used to. But that being said, it keeps your beer safe. Now, I don't mean safe like you're not going to get an infection or an off flavor. You can still get, and I think inspection, we have to use air quotes, or infection. You got to use air quotes, right? Because when I say infection, you could call Brettanomyces, an infection, or you could call, if you're brewing a sour, you could technically call that an infection. But if it's a planned on purpose infection, it's not really an infection, right? It's by design, right? And those kinds of beers, you can draw the beer from underneath the pellicle or whatever and still be fine. I'm talking about like mold, black mold, fuzzy mold, That is not something you want to mess with, and that is a dumper. So the problem with non-alcoholic beer is, of course, there's almost no alcohol, right? What's the legal definition? Under 0.5%, I think it is. So there's really not enough alcohol to stop an infection. And when I say infection, I mean like mold, or, you know, worse. And there's definitely not enough hops. You have to reduce the hops because otherwise, you know, there's not much malt going into it, right? So you can't have your normal amount of hops. So you're at this really high risk. And the American Brewers Association is taking note, and they're very concerned. Even at the craft brewery level, they're very concerned because there's elevated, you know, concerns that if you're transferring the beer, you're bottling the beer, is it being stored with things like food and other things? Like, there's a lot of stuff that can cause cross-contamination. And when you have a product that doesn't have those natural abilities to fight off, you know, these infections, now it isn't just a concern of getting sick. I mean, these can go deadly. Think about what could be growing, you know, that's pretty bad. So, you know, at the homebrew level, we can pasteurize, but it is a pain in the butt. Anybody who's ever done it, I mean, you're going to have a portion of your bottles explode. I always have. I don't do it anymore because, I mean, you're going to lose enough product. And there's no guarantee, right? You're hoping that what you did pasteurized correctly, but there's no way to really verify. And like I said, it's a hassle. I think there is only one way to really minimize the risk if you're doing a homebrew non-alcoholic beer, which is you don't bottle it. And that's exactly what the folks over at Clawhammer did in their video when they did a non-alcoholic beer. They specifically said you put it in the keg, sanitized of course, and you seal it up with the yeast. And they don't even put a spunning valve. Kyle over there specifically said you seal the keg up, no spunning valve. You let it ferment under its own pressure. There's a PRV on the, you know, if it were to get too high of a pressure, of course, it could release. But the point being is you don't want anything getting into that keg. You do not want to open that keg, period. You put a floating dip tube on it, and then you just serve right off the keg, which is kind of what I do anyway, except, you know, I don't necessarily seal my kegs up. But because it's such a small amount of alcohol, you're not going to be generating as much pressure as you would with a normal fermentation. And so that's why it's safer to just seal the keg. Just flat out seal it. Now you're not going to let stuff get in, and it's much less likely there's going to be an infection. But if you try to bottle off that keg, all of a sudden you're reopening the door to infection, right? Because you're having to put it into a bottle. There's oxygen. No matter how careful you are, you're exponentially, potentially, you know, infecting that beer. So, and, you know, if you're going to give that away to somebody, it's a huge concern. Like, you don't want to make someone sick. And, I mean, I'm saying seriously sick. I mean, these things can be pretty bad. You know, we're not just talking about a normal infection. So anyway, I wanted to throw that out there. I know that I talked to some people doing like non-alcoholic sour beers, and they kept getting infections and having issues. So it's a real concern at the homebrew level. As this starts to take off and get, you know, people get excited about it, we need to be very careful about giving this beer out and how we're doing it, where we're keeping it. So that's all I have. I hope that at least opens some, you know, opens your eyes to think about what you can do if you're going to go down that road. And hey, I'm glad you're here. I'll be back in another week with another video. And until then, sláinte.